So if you have a resting heart rate of, say, 60 beats per minute.
Right, which is a pretty solid resting heart rate.
Yeah, exactly. You probably assume your heart is beating exactly once every single second, right? I mean, 60 beats, 60 seconds. It makes perfect mathematical sense.
It does, yeah. On paper, it's perfectly logical.
But it's also completely wrong.
Yeah.
And that microscopic variation, like the actual tiny space between your heartbeats, it might just be the most important health metric you are completely ignoring right now.
We are so conditioned to think of the body as, well, like a machine, you know? We want it to run like a perfectly calibrated grandfather clock where every gear turns with absolute predictable precision.
Right.
And if your heart is acting like a metronome, ticking away the exact same fraction of a second every single second, it feels safe. I mean, it feels stable.
But stepping into the biological data we are unpacking today, that perfect metronome is actually a massive physiological warning sign.
A huge red flag, yeah.
So welcome to today's deep dive. We are talking directly to you, the listener, because today's mission is all about decoding a metric quietly operating inside you right now, one that literally dictates your overall health, your physical performance, and maybe most importantly, your resilience to stress. We're looking at heart rate variability, or HRV.
And to really do this right, we are pulling from the clinical notes and extensive research of human biologist Gary Brecka, along with some really fascinating data from the Journal of Frontiers in Neuroscience.
Yeah, we're not just throwing around fitness influencer buzzwords today.
Exactly. We are going to strip away all that surface-level fitness jargon, dive into the actual cellular mechanics, and give you a clear look at what is happening inside your autonomic nervous system.
So let's start by breaking down the core illusion here, right? This what we can call the metronome myth. I want to pull directly from Brecka's notes because the reality of how the heart beats is just wild to me.
It really is counterintuitive.
It is. Because if we zoom in on an EKG of a heart beating 60 times in a minute, the interval between beat 1 and beat 2 might be, say, 0.8 seconds. But then the interval between beat 2 and beat 3 might be 1.1 seconds,
Right.
then 0.9 seconds. And it's constantly shifting. So the sheer number of beats is your heart rate. But that precise fluctuating measurement of time between those beats, that is your heart rate variability.
And this is where we have to fundamentally shift our perspective on, well, on cardiac function in general.
How so?
So the sinoatrial node, which is the heart's natural pacemaker, it's not operating in isolation. It's not just sitting in a dark room tapping a drum.
Right.
It is being constantly bombarded by signals from your environment, from your internal organs, your emotional state, your immune system, all of it.
Just a massive influx of data every millisecond.
Exactly. So a high HRV, meaning a high degree of mathematical variance between those beats, means the sinoatrial node is receiving all that complex data and making split-second microscopic adjustments to your cardiac output.
Okay, I always try to visualize this in terms of physical movement, just to make sense of the biology.
Sure, yeah.
So think of a professional tennis player waiting to return a blisteringly fast serve.
Okay, I picture that.
If that player is standing completely still, totally rigid, feet planted flat on the baseline, acting like our metronome, basically they are trapped. If the ball gets served down the line, they can't physically overcome their own inertia fast enough to reach it.
You're too locked in.
Right. But if that player is constantly bouncing, shifting their center of gravity from left to right, up and down, their movement has high variability. They are primed to explode in any direction the moment the ball leaves the server's racket.
I love that analogy. That's exactly it.
Your cardiovascular system operates on the exact same principle, doesn't it?
It does. That physical bouncing is the perfect equivalent of what your autonomic nervous system is doing when it maintains high variability. It is keeping the cardiovascular system light on its feet.
Light on its feet. I like that.
Yeah, and so if your HRV is low, your beats are perfectly rigidly spaced. Your internal system has basically planted its feet flat on the ground.
It's stuck.
It is locked into a singular state, which is almost always a state of stress or exhaustion, and it is utterly failing to process new information from the environment.
Okay, so if the heart is just the muscle executing the rhythm, right, we have to look at what is actually sending the signals, what is pulling the string.
The boss behind the scenes.
Yeah, the control center.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the autonomic nervous system.
The ANS, yeah. The autonomic nervous system handles all the involuntary infrastructure of your survival. It manages your pupil dilation when you walk into a dark room.
Things you don't even think about.
Exactly. It controls peristalsis in your gut to digest your food, it regulates your respiratory rate, and crucially, it dictates the firing rate of your heart.
And looking at the medical breakdown in the notes here, the ANS is essentially split into two competing branches, right?
Yes, the classic tug of war.
So we have the sympathetic nervous system, which everyone knows is the fight or flight response,
Right, the gas pedal.
the biological gas pedal designed for high-stress survival. And then there is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest response.
The brake pedal.
Right. So HRV isn't actually a measurement of cardiovascular fitness at all. I mean, not directly. It's a measurement of the real-time tug of war between those two nervous systems.
That is the crucial paradigm shift right there. The heart is merely the display monitor. The autonomic nervous system is the hard drive.
Wow.
And we can see this clearly in that Frontiers in Neuroscience study BRCA references.
Oh, right. The one where they weren't just looking at physical stress.
Exactly. The researchers didn't just look at athletes on treadmills, they monitored individuals undergoing intense emotional and cognitive tasks.
Like solving math problems or dealing with stressful questions.
Yeah, psychological stressors. And they proved that HRV acts as a non-invasive, direct biomarker of autonomic function, directly linking psychological state to physical output.
Meaning your feelings literally change your heartbeat's rhythm.
It tracks emotional regulation just as accurately as physical exertion. It physically links the mind and the body.
So let's unpack the mechanics of that tug of war. When we encounter a stressor, the sympathetic system takes over, right? The gas pedal gets slammed down.
Floor it.
The body prepares to fight or run. It hyperfocuses all its resources on immediate survival.
Yeah.
And in that moment, the heart locks into a rigid, highly predictable rhythm to maximize continuous blood flow to the major muscle groups.
Right, it stops bouncing on its toes.
It plants its feet, and HRV just plummets.
Because think about it, variability is a luxury of a safe environment.
Oh, that's a great way to phrase it.
When you are running from a perceived predator, your heart cannot afford to pause and listen to signals from your digestive tract or, your immune system.
It doesn't care if you're digesting lunch, if you're about to be lunch.
Exactly. It shuts out the noise, overriding the parasympathetic brake pedal entirely. So the intervals between beats become identical.
But wait, let me push back on this for a second, or at least ask what the listener is probably wondering.
Sure.
If the sympathetic system is a brilliant evolutionary mechanism literally designed to save us from threats, why is a plummeting HRV considered a bad thing? I mean, the system is doing exactly what it was programmed to do over millions of years of evolution.
Right, it's doing its job.
Cortisol and adrenaline flood the system, we survive the threat, and then we recover. Why are we suddenly treating the sympathetic nervous system like it's some sort of design flaw?
Well, it's absolutely not a design flaw. It's a fundamental mismatch between our ancient biology and our modern environment.
Mismatch.
Yeah, because the biological mechanism works perfectly for acute short-term threats. A predator attacks, the sympathetic system spikes, HRV drops, you sprint for your life.
Right.
5 minutes later, the threat is gone. The parasympathetic system kicks back online, the vagus nerve releases acetylcholine to slow the heart rate down, your variability returns, and you recover.
You get the bounce back.
The bounce back, exactly. The problem is that the brain cannot distinguish between the existential threat of a predator and the psychological threat of, say, an overflowing email inbox.
Or a looming mortgage payment.
Or a chaotic morning commute.
Mm.
Our modern environment provides this continuous, uninterrupted drip of low-grade stressors.
So the brain is constantly perceiving a threat, which means the sympathetic gas pedal is constantly engaged.
Right.
We never actually get the bounce back.
We never get it. We get stuck in a state of chronic sympathetic dominance. The system remains rigid day after day, month after month.
The feet stay flat on the baseline.
Forever.
Okay, so if our bodies are designed to bounce back, but the modern environment is keeping us locked in this flatlined, low variability state, what is actually breaking under the hood? I mean, let's get into the physiological cascade here.
Yeah.
What are the specific saboteurs keeping the sympathetic system constantly engaged, and what is the physical cost?
The physical cost is, in a word, systemic. It's systemic inflammation and degradation.
Okay, break that down for me.
When you are in chronic sympathetic dominance, your adrenal glands are constantly pumping cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream.
Because it thinks you're always running from a tiger.
Right. And over time, that constant exposure to stress hormones causes severe endothelial dysfunction, meaning the inner lining of your blood vessels literally becomes inflamed and damaged.
Wow.
And this is the direct pathway to hypertension, arterial plaque buildup, and eventually heart disease. It also suppresses the immune system and halts metabolic processes.
Which is why chronic stress is so deeply tied to weight gain and autoimmune issues, right?
Exactly. The body is hoarding energy for a physical fight that never actually happens, while simultaneously ignoring routine cellular maintenance.
So looking at Brecka's notes, he identifies several massive lifestyle saboteurs that artificially force this sympathetic dominance. And some are unavoidable, like age.
Yeah, sadly.
Our autonomic nervous system naturally loses some of its elastic adaptability as we get older. But the ones within our control are fascinating. Dehydration, for instance.
Oh, this is a big one.
I really want to understand the how here. Why does simply not drinking enough water crash my nervous system's variability?
It comes down to blood volume and mechanical strain.
Okay.
When you are dehydrated, your blood plasma volume drops. The blood literally becomes thicker, more viscous,
Like sludge.
literally like sludge. And according to Starling's law of the heart has to work mechanically harder to pump that thicker sludge through your vascular system just to maintain baseline cellular oxygenation.
So the heart is under acute physical stress just doing its normal everyday job.
Exactly. And the autonomic nervous system senses this mechanical strain and interprets it as a threat to survival.
Because it feels the engine struggling.
Right. So it triggers the sympathetic system to force the heart to beat harder and more rhythmically, stripping away your variability. You are in fight or flight simply because your body is struggling to circulate its own fluids.
That makes profound sense. It's just simple plumbing.
Basic physics of the body.
Now, the source material also explicitly highlights alcohol and substance abuse, calling them absolute no-fly zones for HRV.
Yeah.
It doesn't just say they lower it, it says they devastate the metric.
And they really do, because look, alcohol is a central nervous system depressant, right?
Right, it relaxes you. Or so we think.
But its initial metabolization triggers a massive systemic stress response. It freely crosses the blood-brain barrier and disrupts the delicate neurotransmitter balance, heavily blunting your parasympathetic tone.
So it turns off the brake pedal.
Completely. The body treats alcohol as a literal toxin. So the liver goes into overdrive to metabolize it, which requires massive energy and oxygen.
So your resting heart rate elevates.
Yep. And your autonomic nervous system locks into a rigid sympathetic state to manage this physiological crisis.
Even from just one drink.
Even a single glass of wine can demonstrably suppress your HRV for up to 48 hours.
Wow. Up to 48 hours from one glass.
It's pretty sobering when you see the data on a screen.
No pun intended. So on the flip side of these saboteurs, we have the boosters. The biological armor that builds our resilience back up against these chronic stressors. Brecka points to regular physical fitness and high-quality sleep as the ultimate countermeasures.
Let's look at the cellular cascade of sleep because it is so critical.
Please.
Sleep is the only time the parasympathetic nervous system has the uninterrupted floor to perform deep physiological maintenance.
Like taking the car into the shop.
Exactly. During the deep, slow-wave stages of sleep, the brain actively clears out metabolic waste products like amyloid beta through the glymphatic system.
The brain is literally washing itself.
Tissue repair occurs. Cortisol levels drop to their absolute lowest point. But if you truncate your sleep, you interrupt this repair cycle.
You pull the car out of the shop before the oil change is done.
And you wake up with residual cortisol still circulating in your blood, which means your sympathetic system is already partially engaged before you even get out of bed.
Which means your HRV starts the day already suppressed.
Yes, you're starting the day at a biological deficit.
This is why tracking this metric feels so urgent. We can feel totally fine mentally, totally adapted to our high-stress jobs, but our invisible nervous system could be completely redlined.
We are terrible at subjectively feeling our own chronic stress.
Exactly. So if this damage is happening quietly in the background, we need to know how to observe it. Which brings us to the actual measurement matrix. How do we extract this microscopic data from our own bodies?
Historically, extracting this data required an electrocardiogram, an ECG, in a clinical laboratory.
Right, the sticky pads and wires.
You'd have electrodes strapped to your chest to measure the literal electrical depolarization and repolarization of the heart's ventricles with millisecond accuracy.
Not exactly something you can do during your morning commute.
No, not at all. But today, the landscape is dominated by consumer-grade wearables. Whoop straps, R-rings, the Apple Watch.
So I want to understand the engineering here. Because I'm looking at my wrist right now, and there are no electrical nodes stuck to my chest. How is a watch shining a little green light into my arm accurately capturing the millisecond variation between my heartbeats. It feels like magic.
It's not magic. It's actually photoplethysmography, or PPG.
Say that 3 times fast.
Right. PPG. Those green LEDs on the back of your watch shine light through your skin and into the capillary beds in your wrist.
Okay.
And oxygenated hemoglobin in your blood absorbs green light very effectively.
So every time the heart beats and pushes a fresh pulse of blood through your wrist, there is a microsurge in hemoglobin.
And that surge absorbs more of the green light. The photodiode sensor on the watch measures the exact amount of light bouncing back.
Oh, wow.
By tracking those continuous fluctuations in light absorption, the algorithm can calculate the exact pulse wave and determine the time interval between each beat.
That is incredible. But looking at Brecka's protocols, the technology is only half the battle, right? The rules of measurement are incredibly strict. You can't just glance at your watch at 3:00 p.m. while drinking an espresso and expect to see a meaningful number.
That is the fastest way to get completely useless data.
Because there's too much noise.
Exactly. HRV is highly sensitive. If you check it while digesting a meal, while standing up, or, while feeling anxious about an email you just read, the reading will reflect that immediate, acute stressor.
It's just showing you the caffeine in the email.
Right. It won't give you any insight into your underlying autonomic health.
Mm-hmm.
To establish a true, personalized baseline, you have to measure it under perfectly consistent conditions.
Which is why the gold standard is tracking it during deep sleep.
Yes, because your body is stationary, digestion has largely paused, and external environmental stressors are at zero. That is when you can see the true baseline capability of your parasympathetic system.
Okay, so even when we get the clean data, we have to talk about the math.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm looking at Brecka's notes, and there's a lot of alphabet soup associated with these algorithms.
Oh, yeah, the acronyms.
Acronyms like RMSSD and SDNN. What are we actually calculating when we look at our daily score?
So those acronyms are the statistical methods used to quantify the variance. SDNN stands for the standard deviation of NN intervals.
Okay.
It basically looks at the total variance over a long period, like a full 24 hours. But the one most wearables show you daily, the one you actually care about for recovery, is RMSSD. The root mean square of successive differences.
Okay, explain that to me like I'm 5.
I'll try. It isolates the time difference between consecutive heartbeats, squares those differences to make the numbers absolute, and to amplify larger variations, averages them out, and takes the square root.
So it's heavily weighting the sudden changes.
Exactly. What RMSSD does brilliantly is filter out the slow, natural changes in heart rate, like when you simply take a deep breath, and isolates the rapid beat-to-beat changes driven specifically by the parasympathetic nervous system via the vagus nerve.
So when my watch gives me a score of, let's say, 45 milliseconds, it's essentially giving me a grade on my vagus nerve's ability to quickly tap the brakes.
That is the perfect way to summarize it.
Okay, and this brings us to the context of the reading. Because numbers without context are useless.
Absolutely.
If you see a sharp drop in your HRV the morning after a brutal, heavy weightlifting session, you shouldn't panic, right?
No, not at all. That is a normal, healthy biological response.
Because your body is broken down.
Your muscle fibers are torn, inflammation is present, and your sympathetic system is mobilized to manage the acute repair process.
I think of it like the engine temperature gauge on the dashboard of a car. If you were towing a heavy trailer up a steep mountain pass, which is the equivalent of that brutal workout, the temperature needle is going to spike.
The engine is running hot.
Right. And that makes total sense. The system is doing heavy work. The danger isn't the spike itself. The danger is if you unhook the trailer, park the car in your garage, let it idle, and the temperature gauge is still pinned in the red.
Yes. A persistently low HRV while at rest is the engine idling in the red.
It's warning you.
It means the systemic inflammation or the psychological stress hasn't been resolved. The body is still actively fighting a war, even though you are just sitting on the couch.
And because millions of people now have this engine temperature gauge strapped to their wrist, the implications are bleeding far beyond just personal fitness.
It's changing everything.
We are looking at a metric that is reshaping entire industries. Brecka's notes outline 4 key areas where HRV biofeedback is causing a literal revolution.
The most visible is obviously sports and fitness.
Yeah.
For decades, training was based on periodized spreadsheets. You do heavy legs on Tuesday because the spreadsheet says so.
Whether you feel good or not.
Right. But today, elite athletes look at their morning HRV. If it's heavily suppressed, it means their central nervous system hasn't recovered from Monday. Pushing hard on Tuesday won't build muscle. It will just drive them deeper into an overtrained catabolic state.
So they swap the heavy lifts for, what, mobility work?
Yoga, mobility, light walking, training based on actual real-time neurological readiness rather than arbitrary schedules.
That's amazing. But the second area, which I find even more fascinating, is mental health. Therapists and clinical psychologists are using HRV biofeedback screens in session to treat severe anxiety and depression.
This is a massive breakthrough because it creates an objective bridge between the psychological and the physical.
Because usually therapy is so subjective. How are you feeling? I feel bad.
Exactly. But now, in a therapy session, a patient might be asked to recall a traumatic event or confront a phobia. The therapist can actually watch the patient's HRV drop in real time on a monitor as the sympathetic system hijacks their biology.
They can literally see the anxiety hitting the nervous system.
Yes. And then they can use that same screen to train the patient back to baseline. A therapist can guide a patient through diaphragmatic breathing and physically show them the line on the screen moving back up as their parasympathetic system regains control.
Wow.
It visually proves to the patient that they are not powerless against their anxiety. They have biological levers they can pull.
It validates their experience while giving them the tool to fix it. That's incredible.
It really is. Now, the third domain is chronic disease management. Cardiologists and endocrinologists are monitoring autonomic function to tailor incredibly specific interventions.
So, treating things like diabetes.
Yes. For example, if a patient with type 2 diabetes shows a chronic progressive decline in HRV, it is an early warning sign of diabetic autonomic neuropathy.
Which is nerve damage, right?
It's nerve damage affecting the heart and blood vessels. And HRV shows this decline long before the patient feels any physical chest pain. So doctors can adjust beta blockers or metabolic therapies preemptively based on that nervous system degradation.
Catching the fire before there's smoke.
Precisely. And the fourth area is workplace wellness. We are seeing major corporate programs integrate anonymized HRV monitoring to help manage employee stress.
Okay, this forces a complete reevaluation of what burnout actually is.
Because for a long time, burnout was treated by HR departments as, a psychological weakness
Wow.
or a time management issue.
Right, just take a mental health day and you'll be fine.
Right. But if a company is utilizing HRV data, they are acknowledging a biological reality. Chronic workplace stress causes a measurable physical degradation of an employee's autonomic nervous system.
It shifts burnout from a subjective emotional complaint to an objective occupational hazard, like breathing in asbestos.
Exactly. It's a physical liability.
I want you, the listener, to stop and think about this for a second. What stands out to you the most here? Is it the fact that you can finally ditch the generic workout spreadsheets and train exactly to your body's daily capacity? Or is it the mind-bending reality that a therapist can actually watch the physical shadow of your anxiety on a computer screen?
It's wild.
We are moving from guessing how we feel to seeing exactly how our biological machinery is coping.
But, and this is important, seeing the data is only the diagnostic phase.
Right. Knowing the engine is overheating doesn't fix the engine.
Exactly. Once you know your system is redlining, you need the actual tools to fix it.
Which brings us perfectly into the action plan. We are taking control of the wheel. Brecka's notes lay out highly specific, actionable protocols for hacking the parasympathetic nervous system.
And hacking really is the appropriate term here.
Because these aren't just vague wellness tips like take a bubble bath.
No, these are direct mechanical interventions designed to force the vagus nerve to release acetylcholine and command the heart to slow down.
So let's start with aerobic exercise. The baseline protocol is 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity zone 2 cardio. So brisk walking, light cycling, swimming.
Standard stuff, yeah.
But Brecka's notes specifically highlight the massive autonomic benefits of taking a brisk 15-minute walk immediately following a meal.
This is such a powerful hack.
Why specifically after a meal? What is this cellular advantage there?
So when you eat, especially a meal with carbohydrates, your blood glucose spikes.
Right.
To manage that, the pancreas releases insulin and the body expends energy to store the glucose. It is a metabolically demanding process that briefly lowers HRV.
It's hard work for the body.
But by walking immediately after eating, your skeletal muscles require immediate energy. They bypass the insulin pathway entirely and pull that glucose directly out of your bloodstream to use as fuel.
So you drastically blunt the glucose spike, reducing the metabolic stress on the body, which directly protects your parasympathetic tone. That is a brilliant mechanical hack. Just 15 minutes.
Just 15 minutes. It changes your whole metabolic response. Next on the protocol is sleep optimization.
We touched on this earlier. Sleep is the biological repair shop. But Brecka outlines 5 non-negotiable rules for the environment.
The environment is everything.
So you need a pitch black room. You need a cool temperature, ideally around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. You need electronics unplugged and 6 feet away from the bed. 0 blue light screen time before sleep. And in-bed breathing exercises.
I know people hear these tips constantly, but they rarely understand the biological why.
That's what I want to dig into. Like, why does a 68-degree room matter to my heart rate variability?
It's fascinating. Your core body temperature must drop by about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit to initiate and sustain deep, slow-wave sleep.
Okay.
If the room is too warm, your body has to work continuously by sweating and dilating surface blood vessels to dump heat.
It's fighting the environment.
That thermoregulatory effort is a mild stressor that keeps the sympathetic nervous system partially engaged all night. Dropping the ambient temperature actively assists your core body temperature drop, sending a massive safety signal to your brain.
That makes total sense. And the blue light from screens. Why is that such a sleep killer?
So the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells in your eyes,
Wow.
they are specifically calibrated to detect the wavelength of blue light emitted by the sun.
So it's a daylight trigger.
When they detect it, they signal the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain to suppress melatonin production, because blue light means it's daytime.
So staring at a phone at 10:00 p.m. artificially halts the hormonal cascade that triggers your parasympathetic transition into sleep. Your brain literally thinks you are standing out in the midday sun.
Exactly. You are chemically confusing your nervous system.
Moving down the action plan, we hit nutrition and hydration. We already established how dehydration turns blood into sludge and strains the heart.
Right.
So the protocol focuses on whole foods, lean proteins, healthy fats, and eliminating the toxin load of alcohol. But the next category is where the true, immediate biological overrides live: vagus nerve stimulation.
The vagus nerve, cranial nerve 10, is the primary information highway of the parasympathetic nervous system.
The superhighway.
It wanders from the brainstem all the way down through the chest, interfacing with the heart, the lungs, and the digestive tract.
And the notes give us incredibly simple ways to stimulate it. One of them is just breathing out through a straw.
Sounds silly, you're right.
It sounds almost too simple to be a clinical intervention. I really want to unpack the actual physics of this.
It is entirely about physics and pressure. So when you inhale, your diaphragm moves down, your lungs expand, and the space in your thoracic cavity increases.
Okay, my chest opens up.
This briefly lowers the pressure inside your chest, which causes blood to rush back to the heart faster. The heart actually speeds up to pump this extra blood. That is a sympathetic micro-response.
Wait, so inhales are naturally sympathetic. They act like a tiny gas pedal.
Yes, every single time you breathe in. But when you exhale, the diaphragm moves up, the lungs deflate, and the pressure in your chest increases.
Okay.
This slows the return of blood to the heart, and the vagus nerve senses this pressure change through these little sensors called baroreceptors. The vagus nerve fires, releasing acetylcholine onto the sinoatrial node, physically slowing the heart down.
And that is a parasympathetic response.
Yeah.
The brake pedal.
Exactly. So by breathing out through a straw, or even just pursing your lips like you're blowing out a candle, you are creating artificial resistance.
You are forcing the exhale to take twice as long as the inhale.
You are mechanically extending the exact phase of respiration that triggers the vagus nerve to tap the brakes.
You are manually overriding the system. You could do it at a desk, in traffic, or before a stressful meeting. That is so beautifully simple.
It's biology hacking at its finest. Another profound vagal stimulator on the list is deliberate cold exposure.
Okay, the 30-second cold shower or the ice bath. Now, this one seems totally counterintuitive based on everything we've talked about so far. Doesn't jumping into freezing water cause a massive, violent spike in sympathetic stress?
Oh, it absolutely does. The cold shock triggers a massive release of norepinephrine. You gasp, your blood vessels constrict, your heart rate skyrockets. It is a pure, intense survival response.
So why do we want that?
Because the magic happens in what you do next.
The forced adaptation.
Exactly. While your body is screaming at you to panic, you consciously take control of your breathing. You force those slow, elongated exhales we just talked about. You are actively commanding your parasympathetic nervous system to step in and wrestle control away from the sympathetic spike. It is like taking your vagus nerve to the gym and making it lift heavy weights.
You are training the neurological pathway of resilience.
You are teaching your body how to bounce back from a massive stressor efficiently. So when your boss yells at you later that day, your nervous system already knows how to hit the brakes.
That is incredible. So finally, Brecka's lifestyle category touches on the broader structural habits, things like maintaining consistent circadian routines, eating and exercising at the same times every day, so the autonomic nervous system doesn't have to constantly calculate unpredictability,
Consistency is safety to the brain.
and prioritizing meaningful social connections to boost emotional well-being.
Social connection isn't just an emotional nice to have, right? It's a profound biological safety signal.
Yep.
There's this concept called neuroception, which is the subconscious process where our nervous system evaluates risk in the environment. When we engage in safe, trusting social interactions, eye contact, laughing with a friend, hearing a soothing vocal tone, our neuroception registers absolute safety,
So it turns off the alarm bells.
deeply engaging the ventral vagal complex and powerfully boosting HRV.
It's wild how everything is interconnected. We are looking at a unified system where a conversation with a friend, the temperature of your bedroom, and the length of your exhale all converge to dictate the electrical rhythm of your heart.
The core realization here is that you are not a passenger in this vehicle. For a long time, we thought the autonomic nervous system was a closed loop that we just couldn't access.
Right, it was involuntary.
But HRV proves that we have access to the control panel.
So to bring all this together, let's recap this journey. We started by shattering the illusion that a perfectly rhythmic heart is a healthy heart. We learned that heart rate variability, the microscopic, constant shifting of time between beats, is the ultimate proof of an adaptable, resilient system.
We expose the tug of war between the sympathetic survival drive and the parasympathetic recovery system. We saw how chronic stress, dehydration, and alcohol lock us into a rigid state of alarm, driving systemic inflammation.
We looked at the exact mechanisms behind consumer wearables, utilizing photoplethysmography to track the root mean square of successive differences, giving us a literal dashboard for our internal stress. And most importantly, we broke down the mechanical levers, from elongating exhales through physical resistance to shocking the vagus nerve with cold water that let you actively rewrite your autonomic state.
If you take away nothing else from Gary Brecka's research, let it be this. The mind and the body are not separate entities. Your emotional state and your cardiovascular resilience are the exact same biological process viewed from different angles.
And as you listen to this, do not feel overwhelmed by the protocol. You don't need to rebuild your life overnight. Small, deliberate injections of parasympathetic tone, a 5-minute walk after lunch, dimming the lights an hour earlier, taking 6 deep breaths with elongated exhales will compound over time, drastically increasing your adaptability.
It really is about building the foundation of resilience, beat by fluctuating beat.
I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, building on the profound reality of these wearables. We know millions of people are currently broadcasting their internal biological stress data to their phones. We know clinical therapists are using this data to identify hidden anxieties, and corporate HR departments are using it to track burnout.
Right.
So, what is the next logical step here? If our internal emotional states, our hidden anxieties, our neurological exhaustion, are now an objective, constantly broadcastable metric via our HRV, will we soon see a world where our smart environments begin to automatically react to our biology?
Oh, that's a wild thought.
Think about the implications. Imagine walking into your office and your schedule software automatically cancels your 2:00 p.m. presentation and blocks out an hour of recovery time, simply because it read the suppressed HRV data radiating from your wrist.
A calendar that knows you're too stressed to present.
Exactly. Imagine the smart lighting in your home automatically dimming to a warm amber, and your phone proactively silencing all notifications, because your house knows your sympathetic nervous system is redlining before you even realize you're stressed.
It's like the world wrapping around your nervous system.
We started today by realizing that human beings are not built to be rigid, predictable metronomes. Perhaps the next great technological leap is building a world that finally stops treating us like machines and actually adapts to the complex, fluctuating rhythm of our humanity. Something to think about. Catch you next time on The Deep Dive.